all, I'd like to thank Senior Chief Palmer Pinckney. When I knew him, he was just Chief. He'll always be Chief to me. And Chaplain, I think I'm just going to quit after that. I mean, I don't need to do anything now. And it's such an honor to be here. It's great to be here, today. Sorry, I couldn't help. I've been waiting 5 years for that joke. So, all right, listen, just let me have my fun, all right? So, I really got to point out, I got to call out Senior Chief Palmer Pinckney here, who, as it happens, is my old shipmate from USS Blue Ridge, and my old chief as well. So after about 3 years of serving with him, I managed to rack up a little bit of a debt with this guy, including, but not limited to, my life 2 times, my career 3 times, and my sanity, I'm not even going to count. And, in short, Chief, there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to pay you back, but hey, thanks for breakfast. So, as some of you may know, my last time here at DINFOS was about 5 years ago. And after I graduated from the Navy Mass Communications program, on the day that I left this school, if I had acknowledged in any way, or if I had left any kind of evidence of my sexual orientation, I would have been kicked out of the United States Navy. At that time, it was hard to imagine that the now infamous Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy would ever be repealed. Now, the Department of Defense seems to be in a completely different landscape for equal rights, and changes have been occurring in what could be called a revolutionary pace. Now, at this ceremony, we're commemorating the very first official Department of Defense Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender History Month celebration, and I am all too aware of the gravity of this historic occasion, not only as a DINFOS graduate, but also as a citizen of this country. With that in mind, I'm left with the challenge of trying to tell you something that you don't know about LGBT history, but I'm kind of limited in skill, and I'm surrounded by some of the military's best public speakers and speech writers, so I've decided to take a different route. Instead, I'm going to tell you about something that you already know. Speech is power. Speech is not simply powerful, nor influential, nor important. Speech is power. From the very moment the first humans started mumbling and talking and forming words, the seeds of political systems and democracy first took root. As the great political theorist Hannah Arendt once said, power is what keeps the public realm in existence. Of course, she didn't mean force or strength, but she meant power as that dynamic between persons that fosters action. And the public realm is ultimately just a realm of human relations which occur through speech, whether they be the motions of our hands, our voices, or the images we share with each other. There's no separation. Speech is power. And thus begins the fundamental truth in LGBT history. Many of you may be aware that there's this big gap in LGBT history, at least in the West. Most of our great figures existed either before the rise of Christianity or after the 1930s. So for nearly 2,000 years, it's as if people like me just didn't exist. Not a word was spoken about LGBT persons, except in reference to, of course, heresies and purges. But in almost 2,000 years of history, it's as if there was not a single member of the LGBT community. Yet before this void, there were many. Indeed, one of the greatest men in history was gay. He was a king of ancient Greece. He conquered more land on this earth than any other empire in human history. He had many wives and openly bragged that they were nothing more than political arrangements. He revolted against the idea of having any kind of romantic interest in women. He had only one romantic partner in life, a man named Hephaestion, whom he grew up with, whom he openly called my beloved, my other half, my lover, As a young prince, he'd sail and walk along the shores of Greece with his lover Hephaestion, and they called this man Alexander the Great. Alexander publicly compared his relationship with Hephaestion to that of Achilles and Patroclus, whom even Plato acknowledged were gay. They lived in a time and place when gay marriages and partnerships were commonplace and accepted. They studied under Aristotle together, they conquered the world together, despite all the historic evidence pointing towards Alexander the Great being not only the most powerful gay man in history, but also the most powerful man, period, in history. It has been the work over the last few millennia to attempt to re-explain his relationships, or simply fail to acknowledge the existence of Hephaestion at all. These expressions of their existence, the words of Alexander and his compatriots and historians, are dangerous to the status quo. They imbue power to a community that has lived long without it. You see, it's no accident that throughout history, it is the speech of gay people which is banned, smudged over, ignored, and punished. Without speech, there can be no power, and without power, no legitimacy. Fast forward to 1952. A British man named Alan Turing is in a Manchester police station. Alan Turing is responsible for basically inventing modern computer science theory, the use of algorithms in community, and most modern methods of code encryption and decryption. In other words, your neighbors at the NSA owe this guy at least one beer, at least one. And this man is a genius responsible for some of the most important technological advances in the last century. But right now, in 1952, Alan Turing is reporting a burglary with his partner, Arnold Murray. After a cursory investigation of the burglary, Turing was charged with indecency for admitting he was reporting the crime alongside his lover. The British court, in its infinite mercy, sentenced him to chemical castration, a friendly alternative to life in prison. Alan Turing was found dead 2 years later in what was reportedly a suicide. From the moment Alan Turing opened his mouth and spoke of his relationship, he had created a dilemma. The police could either allow his words to go by unpunished, and through those words create a space for legitimacy to exist, or they could use judicial force to destroy him for that speech. We know what happened. But 1978 was a very different year. In 1978, a man named Harvey Milk had become the first openly gay elected official in the country. He was elected to the City Commission in San Francisco. He enacted community-wide non-discrimination ordinances, and he was a fearless advocate for the rights of the oppressed. And it is safe to say that many of these leadership qualities he first developed as a Navy diving officer aboard the USS Kittiwake during the Korean War. Not a lot of people know that. Yet Harvey Milk was not always out of the closet and in charge. In fact, for most of his life, he was a chameleon. He was described by an old shipmate not as the slightest bit girly, but as a man's man, which, is, I guess, partly true, although maybe not in the way he really intended, but it's true. He was a man's man, and Harvey was not in the foreground. He was kind of hiding for most of his life. He took on such high-profile jobs, and I'm not making this up, really. He was an actuarial statistician at an insurance company. He was a Wall Street researcher, and he was an outreach phone caller for Barry Goldwater's presidential campaign. So at some point, Harvey Milk got fed up. In the 60s, he was telling his old boyfriends to stay in the closet, stay out of trouble, don't get involved in that gay liberation movement, you'll just get in trouble. And someday, after he moved to San Francisco, something just switched. Maybe he had enough, maybe he was angry, maybe he just wanted to lead again. We have no way of knowing, but what we do know is that Harvey Milk changed American politics forever. He made recruits out of all of us in the fight for equality, and did what all great officers do. He led others in a fight for what's right to his very last breath. Harvey Milk was shot and killed on the stairs inside the San Francisco City Hall. And if you had been there, your feet scrambling over the blood-soaked steps to see if Harvey was all right, you might have noticed that he was still wearing the belt buckle he earned as a Navy deep-sea diver. Through speech, he became the first openly gay man in a position of power in any Western civilization since before the reign of the Roman Emperor Constantine. It's that long. It's a long time. I don't know, how do you measure 2,000 years? It's quite a while. But speech is power. It is the power for those who wish to remember ancient history as it really was, not simply as it is most comfortable for the historian. Speech is power for those who are the creators of new inventions, no matter the timing of their birth. Speech is power for the activist, the public servant, who changes the world around them. Speech is power for the young men and women who today no longer fear their own words while serving in this United States military. The achievements of the LGBT community are undeniable. The only way to deny this history is to deny the very identity of those who achieved it. The only way to deny is to say that this identity is nothing more than a fixation, a sickness, a grave sin. By making the bonds of marriage and love between two persons less than a habit, an addiction which yearns to be cured, by these methods are great men and women's human dignity slandered as nothing more than perversions and abominations. The only voice that can counter this, the only narrative that can win against such ignorance, is a voice led by the LGBT community. When we celebrate our history, our power, it's because the last 2,000 years have taught us that silence is the true death of every single gay person on earth. Enforcing silence is the only way to erase LGBT people from history. It is from this fundamental darkness that policies like Don't Ask, Don't Tell are conceived. So at this crossroads, at this moment in time in history, there's no greater statement, no more clear message, no more potent a truth than standing before you today and speaking. 5 years ago, I would have ruined my life for doing what I'm about to do. 5 years ago, I would have feared these words ever escaping my lips. 5 years ago, I was terrified of any question about my sexuality that could lead to an honest answer. Today, I stand before you with a few words to show just how far we've come. I'm gay. And those, my friends, are very powerful words. Thank you.